I am extremely, extremely excited to welcome you to Quiet the Clock podcast. This has been a passion project of mine for years, so it's really surreal to be sitting here, to be filming this, to be putting this out into the world. This was born out of my personal journey through navigating my 30s and uncertainty and dating and egg freezing, and also born out of having multiple conversations with other women, my clients that have experienced similar journeys, and was really born out of that and really born out of this desire to cultivate more conversation around these journeys that might look very different than all of the shoulds, all the societal expectations, all the internal pressures we put on ourselves to follow this path of partnership, marriage, family building, and not being so linear and embracing journeys that detour or evolve differently. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Beth Gulotta. I am a psychotherapist. I have a private practice in Midtown Manhattan. I felt as a therapist and as a person that has been through this, we need to be cultivating more conversation and building a community of women that support each other through this, to normalize that it doesn't all look the same, that everybody's path is different and unique. So it felt really important for me to put this together. And I want to share with you sort of how we came to decide on the name for the podcast. I was hearing a lot of narratives, my own, my clients, my friends, about running out of time, wasting time, feeling behind, and sort of just gathering all these narratives together and putting it out to my incredible team. They came back to me with Quiet the Clock. And I thought that just encapsulated everything, really just, quieting the narratives, quieting the shoulds, quieting the comparison, and the clock, our biological clock. Like for women, it's a real thing. And talking about specifically for egg freezing, quieting the clock, in that we can buy ourselves some time through, if you decide to go through this path. What else this podcast is going to be talking about, again, is the journey through the 30s. And I'm going to share very vulnerably my own journey, which as a therapist, that can be a very scary thing because I'm going to disclose, and some of my clients might be listening to this, but I feel very strongly that this conversation needs to be out there and to be normalized. So I'm going to be very vulnerable on this podcast and be sharing a lot about my own journey and the things that I have experienced and been through. I'm a huge believer in the journey through the 30s. And I remember I think it was I had to be 21 years old. I had just graduated college. I moved to Europe to follow my boyfriend at the time, who was playing professional basketball overseas. And I was in the stands at a basketball game with another team member's wife, who was, I don't know, she must have been 32, but to my 21-year-old self, she was ancient. And I remember so vividly her turning to me and she's saying, "Your 30s are your best." And I was like, no way. I was like, I'm 21. I'm living in Europe. This is my best life right now. And fast forward, I'm 42 now. Oh, not yet. I'll be 42 next month. I look back to that moment. I'm like, holy hell, she was right. And I think there's such tremendous growth, self-reflection, understanding that happens in your 30s. I think we, as women too, we get really clear on the things that we want, the things that we value, the people that we value, the type of relationships we want to have. And so I really do think it's a really empowering decade, a decade of real growth. But I think also with that comes a lot of pressure and expectations on women to meet these milestones, to find the partner, to get married, to have a child. So while there's tremendous growth, experience, opportunity, there's also potentially a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, a lot of uncertainty. And that's been my personal experience. And you'll hear from other women on this podcast. That's been their experience too. There's these ebbs and flows, these highs and lows, a range of very different emotions that happen. And this is part of what we'll be talking about on the podcast, is how to navigate all of that. And I think it's a really important conversation. While planning and preparing to put this podcast together, I started to cultivate a list of guests and just started to have incredible conversations with other women who were so brave and so courageous and so vulnerable. And I'm so grateful that they were open and willing to share their stories. And through these conversations, just evolve these layers of complexities that, everybody's journey, while somewhat similar, had all a different range of emotions and feelings. One woman that went through egg freezing felt empowered. Another woman that went through it felt angry. Uncovered just the layers and layers and dimensions to this process, to navigating 30s. And it was really fascinating for me to hear their stories and to see where my story aligned or didn't align, or where different emotions came up for me. And I think it's really important to highlight just the range of experiences women have had. In doing this and having these conversations, I just started to realize how amazing and you'll hear when you listen to these episodes, how amazing and incredible and how accomplished all these women are. They're like badasses. They're highly successful in their careers, multiple degrees, just very amazing women. But also with that, it's kind of this idea or this feeling like I have all these things, but I don't have this. I don't have partnership. I don't have children. I am afraid of, my timeline. I'm afraid of running out of time. And really their journey and decision to freeze eggs for the option of motherhood later on. And I feel very grateful that they're willing to be on here and share their stories. And my hope with this podcast is that more women will feel comfortable to start sharing more, because I think this can be a very lonely space. I know for me personally, when I was going through this, I watched my twin sister get married and have children. I watched a lot of friends get married, have children, buy homes, and I was single. And, I found myself in this place where I all of a sudden didn't relate to the people closest to me in my life. And no one related to me as, 34 and single and not having all these things or reach these milestones. And for me, it was really a lonely place. At the time that I froze my eggs, I knew one other person that had done that. So, my hope with this podcast is to cultivate a community of women that will share, will talk, will, dismantle this idea that there's a right time to partner up and a right time to have a baby, and we could support each other through all of this and normalize that every path looks different and celebrate that our paths look different. Really moving women away from comparison, because I know I got stuck in that trap. I know for me, it was really hard to watch other people get engaged and get married and have children, and for me to not have reached those things yet. And I think that's a really hard place to be. And it can be a really lonely place to be. I think out of that space are narratives that are born that are really harmful and hurtful to ourselves. And not having a space or a person to talk through that stuff can be really hard. And as well-meaning as friends can be, if they're not in that same space, they just might not understand or they might not get it. So I really want this to be a space of support, of relatability, of sharing, of normalizing. That's my real hope. This is why I'm doing this. This is why this has been a passion project of mine for so long. So on this podcast, we're going to be talking about all the things I've already said, but we're also going to be talking about dating and the frustrations with dating and what women's experiences are that are out there dating now, what the dating pool is like, what being on apps is like. We're going to be talking about friendship. We're going to be talking about those moments where, you and a very close friend are in really different spaces and you just can't connect and you can't relate in a way that maybe you used to. We're going to be talking about egg freezing and the range of emotions that go in that, from contemplating that decision to going through the process, what it means financially, what it means physically, what it means emotionally to be going through that. We're going to be talking to an incredible doctor that is going to answer some questions for us on that process. That was one thing that was really interesting for myself. And as I've had these other conversations with the women you'll hear from, is that there's a lot we don't understand. There's a lot that we don't know about our bodies and what goes into that process. So we're going to cover that. We're going to be talking to an incredible therapist who's really been a pioneer in the mental health space for infertility and fertility treatments. So she's going to be sharing a lot, and she's absolutely incredible. And I'm just really hopeful that this is a space that can help women to hear that they are not alone, to hear that their story, while everybody's story is unique, that there are shared experiences. There are women that can relate to what you're going through. I can certainly relate to what you're going through. And as I said, I'm going to be very vulnerable, and I'm going to really share, because I think through that, you build connection, you build togetherness, you build understanding. It's my real desire that this podcast can be a place for that. I really want this podcast to be also a place of hope and reassurance. I know for me that there was a lot of times that I didn't feel those things, that there was a lot of hope that was lost. There was a lot of sadness. And I really want this podcast to give that to other women. I know for me, particularly in my journey, I look back now and I wish that I had leaned into all the things that were good. I had been more grateful for the things that I had and less focused on the things that I didn't have. But there were moments for me where that was really hard. And so I really get that. But I do wish, hindsight, I could go back and tell myself, be proud of this journey. Be proud that it looks different. Embrace the fact that you've taken a different way, that you've taken other risks, you pursued other things. And I think I didn't spend enough time in that space and really being proud and empowered. So that's also what I want to offer here, some hope and some reassurance. For me, there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of sad moments. So my hope is that, through these stories and through normalizing this journey that looks maybe a little bit different, that there's less tears and there's more joy. So I do really hope that this podcast helps. So if this is something that you relate to, or this sounds like a journey or a path that you're on, please stay tuned for our upcoming episodes. We have incredible women sharing their stories, sharing their journeys, sharing how they've navigated their 30s, how they've navigated egg freezing. And it's such incredible, powerful stories that I think will be really helpful. So again, if this relates to you, please stay tuned and join us for all the upcoming episodes.